Have you ever wondered what would happen if you discovered your entire life was a carefully constructed lie? Claire Thompson thought she had it all: a stable marriage, wonderful children, a successful veterinary practice in Nashville. At 41, she had found the peace she'd always sought, far from the drama and passion of her youth. But sometimes fate has cruel plans for people who think they've controlled their lives. An unexpected inheritance in Kentucky would force Claire to confront a past she had buried 20 years ago, revealing secrets that would shake the foundation of everything she believed in. The reunion with Tyler Lewis, her first and only great love, should have been just a nostalgic coincidence. But when Claire discovered that her husband Nathan was Tyler's former best friend, a detail he had forgotten to mention in 12 years of marriage, she realized she was at the center of a web far more complex than she imagined. The betrayal she began to uncover wasn't just emotional but existential. Her entire life had been orchestrated by a man she thought she knew, but who would reveal himself to be a dangerous and obsessive stranger. The revenge Nathan had plotted against Tyler and against her was a masterpiece of psychological manipulation, built over decades with the patience of an experienced predator. He had stolen not just her ability to choose, but years of happiness she could have lived with the man she truly loved. The emotional fraud she would discover included murder, blackmail, and a web of lies so elaborate it would make any thriller seem simplistic. Every loving gesture, every romantic moment, every important decision of her life had been calculated by someone who confused obsession with love. But this story isn't just about betrayal and manipulation. It's about how truth always finds a way to the light, even when buried under decades of lies. It's about a woman who discovered strengths she didn't know she possessed, a love that withstood 20 years of sabotage, and a revenge as poetic as it was devastating. Because sometimes when we think we've lost everything, we discover that someone was fighting for us in the shadows, preparing the perfect moment for justice to be served. Prepare yourself for a story that will make you question everything you believe about love, destiny, and the power of truth. Claire Thompson woke up every morning at 6 sharp, brewed strong coffee, and watched Nashville come alive through her kitchen window. At 41, she had built exactly the life she'd always dreamed of: a thriving veterinary clinic, 2 healthy twin children, and a marriage that, despite its ups and downs, worked like a Swiss watch. Nathan, her musician husband, was always traveling with the band, but that never bothered her much. In fact, she even enjoyed those quiet moments when she could dedicate herself completely to the animals and children. The routine was comforting, predictable, safe, everything a woman who grew up in instability could desire. Each day followed an almost mathematical pattern: clinic in the morning, lunch with the twins, appointments in the afternoon, family dinner when Nathan was in town. It was a life without major upheavals, without unnecessary drama, without the anger that had marked her turbulent youth. Claire had learned to value peace above all else, even if it meant giving up certain passions. The romance of her life now was with stability, and she was at peace with that choice, or at least she believed she was. The veterinary clinic Paws and Hearts was her pride and joy, built brick by brick over 15 years of hard work. She started treating animals at home, then rented a modest little room until she could buy the building where it operated today. Clients adored her. Claire had a special way with animals, infinite patience that made even the most aggressive dogs calm down in her hands. Nathan always joked that she understood animals better than people, and maybe he was right. With animals, everything was simpler. They didn't lie, didn't betray, didn't hold grudges for years. When a dog was in pain, it showed. When it was happy, it wagged its tail without ulterior motives. It was an honest, transparent world where emotional fraud simply didn't exist. Claire had found in this universe the perfect refuge for a soul that had been hurt too much in youth. The revenge that time sometimes brings against our dreams had been gentle with her, or so she thought. The twins, Jake and Emma, were the light of her eyes, 2 10-year-old children full of energy and curiosity. Jake had inherited his father's musical talent, always with a guitar in his hands, while Emma showed signs of following her mother's footsteps, caring for all the injured animals she found along the way. They had a close relationship with Nathan, who, even though he traveled a lot, always made time for the children when he was home. Her husband's absences were never a source of conflict. Claire understood that music was his passion, just as animals were hers. There was a tacit agreement between them. He pursued his dreams on the road, she took care of the family base in Nashville. It was an arrangement that worked, even though sometimes Claire felt a pang of loneliness during the long tours. But loneliness wasn't betrayal, and she had learned to fill those voids with work and dedication to the children. Hollywood romance was in the movies. Real life was made of commitments and responsibilities. Nathan Brooks was a good man, one of those people everyone likes to have around. Talented guitarist, dedicated father, present husband when he was home. They met at a mutual friends party 15 years ago when Claire was starting the clinic and he was struggling to take off in music. It was one of those romances that are born from friendship, grow slowly, and solidify in companionship. There was no overwhelming passion, no sleepless nights thinking about each other, other. It was something more mature, more calculated, more secure. Nathan courted her with the patience of someone who knew she had been hurt in the past, respecting her limits and fears. When they finally got married, Claire felt she had found her safe harbor. The anger and pain of youth were left behind, replaced by a tranquility she never imagined possible. It was a different love, but it was love, or at least that's what she repeated to herself in sleepless dawns. Life in Nashville had its own rhythm, a cadence that combined perfectly with Claire's temperament. The city breathed music, but also had space for other dreams, other professions, other ways of being happy. She had adapted well to the climate, the people, the local culture. The neighbors were friendly, the community welcoming, and she had built a solid network of friendships over the years. There were the mothers of the twins' friends, veterinary colleagues, clients who became friends. It was a rich social life, but not complicated, exactly how Claire liked it. No drama, no intrigue, nothing that could shake the carefully constructed structure. The emotional fraud that had marked her youth was a thing of the past. Now she lived surrounded by genuine people and transparent relationships, or at least that's what she believed, until that fateful Tuesday in October. Sometimes life has a cruel way of showing us that not everything is what it seems. On that Tuesday in October, however, everything changed forever. The phone rang during lunch, interrupting her conversation with the assistant about a golden retriever that needed surgery. On the other end of the line, a formal and distant voice informed her that her Aunt Margaret had died and left her a property in Kentucky. Claire felt the world spin for a second. She hadn't seen her aunt in more than 15 years, and never imagined she would be remembered in the will. The horse farm in Lexington represented not just an unexpected inheritance, but a forced return to the past she had carefully buried. It was as if fate was playing a trick on her, forcing her to revisit memories she preferred to keep locked away. The betrayal of time was beginning to reveal itself, bringing to light secrets she didn't even know existed. That phone call would be the first domino in a sequence that would change everything. The decision to travel to Kentucky wasn't easy, but something inside her, perhaps curiosity, perhaps nostalgia, pushed her toward that small town where she had spent the summers of her adolescence. Nathan was in the middle of a West Coast tour. The twins had tests at school and the clinic was packed with patients, but the inheritance needed to be resolved, papers signed, the property evaluated. While packing her suitcase, Claire had no idea she was about to discover that her entire life had been built on an elaborate lie. The revenge that fate sometimes plots against our naivety was just beginning to unfold. The romance she thought she had left behind in Kentucky was about to resurface devastatingly. The emotional fraud that would mark the coming months would begin with a simple reunion, and the anger she thought she had overcome would return with full force, forever changing her perception of love, loyalty, and truth. The road to Lexington seemed longer than Claire remembered, winding between green hills that awakened long dormant memories. Each mile brought her closer not just to Aunt Margaret's inheritance, but to a past she had carefully packaged and stored in the attic of her mind. The small Kentucky town maintained the same rural charm from 20 years ago. Wooden houses with wide porches, white fences delimiting properties, horses grazing peacefully under the afternoon sun. It was like going back in time, and Claire felt a strange mixture of nostalgia and apprehension. The aunt's farm was on the outskirts, a modest but well-maintained property, with stables that had seen better days. As she parked the car, she had no idea that her life was about to be turned upside down. The romance she thought she had left behind was hidden there, waiting for the right moment to resurface. Destiny's betrayal would begin with a simple look through the fence, and the revenge that time sometimes plots against our most careful plans was just beginning. It was then that she saw him. Tyler Lewis was on the other side of the fence, adjusting the saddle of a bay horse, the same brown hair now with gray threads at the temples, the same confident posture that had won her over in adolescence. For a moment, Claire thought she was dreaming. 20 years had passed, but he seemed to have stopped in time, just matured like a fine wine. Her heart raced in a way she hadn't felt in decades, a visceral reaction that caught her completely off guard. Tyler looked up and saw her, and the world stopped for a few eternal seconds. The smile that formed on his face was the same one that made her melt at 17, full of a tenderness she had forgotten existed. The fraud she had committed against herself over the years, pretending she had completely overcome that love, crumbled in a matter of seconds. The anger she felt at being forced to relive those emotions was immediately replaced by an overwhelming wave of nostalgia. It was as if the 20 years had been just a long and confusing dream. Claire Thompson? His voice still had the same warm tone, with that soft Kentucky accent she had always found irresistible. She waved timidly, feeling like an awkward teenager again. Tyler dropped the horse's reins and walked toward the fence, each step making her heart beat faster. "My God, you haven't changed a bit," he said, and she laughed nervously, knowing it wasn't true. The years had left their marks, but apparently he still saw her with the eyes of first love. The conversation flowed naturally, as if 2 decades hadn't passed since they last spoke. Tyler told her he had inherited the neighboring ranch from his father and had never left Lexington. She talked about Nashville, about the clinic, about how life had been generous to her, but there was something unspoken hanging in the air, a delicious tension that both felt but dared not name. The romance they had lived in youth was there, latent, waiting for just a trigger to explode again. During the first hours of conversation, they danced around the elephant in the room, the fact that she was married, that he was apparently single, that there was still something powerful between them. Tyler talked about the horses, about how he had transformed the property into a respected training center in the region. Claire told about the challenges of maintaining a veterinary clinic, about how she loved caring for animals. It was a safe conversation between 2 civilized adults who had met by chance. But his eyes said something else, and she knew hers also betrayed her true feelings. When Tyler mentioned he had never married, Claire felt a pang of something she couldn't define. Relief, guilt, regret. The emotional fraud she had committed against herself over the years was being cruelly exposed. The anger she felt at being in that impossible situation grew every minute, but it was a sweet anger, mixed with nostalgia that made her question all the choices she had made. It was during a pause in the conversation when Tyler offered coffee and they sat on his house's porch that the subject inevitably reached the present. "And you? How's life in Nashville? Married, I imagine," he said, trying to sound casual but unable to hide the anxiety in his voice. Claire hesitated for a moment before answering. "Yes, married for 12 years. I have twin children." She saw something go out in his eyes, a disappointment he tried to quickly disguise. "And your husband, what's his profession?" Tyler asked, clearly forcing the conversation into safe territory. "He's a musician. Nathan Brooks? Maybe you know his band." Tyler's reaction was instantaneous and shocking. He almost dropped his coffee cup, his face visibly paling. "Nathan Brooks? Did you say Nathan Brooks?" His voice had changed completely, loaded with an emotion Claire couldn't decipher. Was it surprise? Anger? Betrayal? Something was very wrong, and she felt she was about to discover a truth that would change everything. "You know my husband?" Claire asked, her heart racing for completely different reasons now. Tyler remained silent for long seconds, running his hands through his hair in a gesture she remembered well from adolescence. He always did that when he was nervous or confused. "Claire, Nathan Brooks was my best friend in high school. We were inseparable until you went to college." His words fell like a bomb between them. Claire felt the world spin, trying to process the impossible information. How was it possible that her husband was Tyler's best friend and she never knew? How had Nathan never mentioned knowing Tyler? The emotional fraud being revealed was much bigger than she imagined. Destiny's revenge was showing its claws, and she was at the center of a web of coincidences that seemed too impossible to be true. The anger that began to grow inside her wasn't directed at Tyler, but at Nathan. Why had he never told her about this friendship? The romance she thought she had left behind was proving more complicated than she had ever imagined. "But how? Why did he never tell me about you?" Claire asked, her voice trembling. Tyler slowly shook his head, as if he too was trying to understand the situation. "We lost touch when you went to college. I stayed here. He went to Nashville to pursue his music dream. We talked a few times in the first years, but then nothing. I didn't even know he had gotten married." His explanation made sense, but something still bothered Claire deeply. Why had Nathan never mentioned Tyler, even casually? Why, in 15 years of relationship, had the former best friend's name never come up in conversations? The betrayal she was beginning to feel wasn't romantic, but emotional, as if she had been deceived about something fundamental. Tyler continued. "A few years after you moved, I tried to get in touch with him, but the numbers had changed, and I ended up giving up." Destiny's cruel revenge was revealing itself. She had married the best friend of the man she had never been able to completely forget, and now, 20 years later, she was there, sitting on his porch, discovering that her entire life might have been built on an impossible coincidence. The following weeks turned into an emotional roller coaster that Claire never imagined living again. Resolving Aunt Margaret's inheritance required more time than expected. There were documents to sign, lawyers to consult, the property to evaluate and put in order. Each day in Kentucky was an excuse to postpone the return to Nashville, and Claire knew she was playing with fire. Tyler offered to help with the farm's horses, knew all the veterinarians in the region, had contacts that would facilitate the sale or maintenance of the property. It was genuine help, but both knew there was much more behind that growing proximity. The fraud Claire committed against herself was evident. She wasn't staying because of the inheritance, but because of him. The revenge that destiny plotted against her organized life was working perfectly. The romance she thought she had buried resurfaced with every conversation, every look, every shared moment. The anger she felt at being in that situation was mixed with a happiness she hadn't experienced in years, and the betrayal she was beginning to commit against Nathan grew silently, day after day. The meetings began innocently: breakfast to discuss inheritance papers, lunches to meet buyers interested in the property, walks through the fields to evaluate the condition of the pastures. Tyler was the perfect gentleman, respectful, careful not to cross limits they both knew existed, but the chemistry between them was undeniable, an electric current that ran through the air whenever they were close. They talked about everything, about the dreams they had in youth, about how life had taken them down different paths, about the choices they made and those they didn't make. Tyler told her he had had some serious relationships over the years, but none had resulted in marriage. "I think I never managed to completely forget one person," he said one afternoon, looking directly into her eyes. The emotional fraud Claire committed by not telling Nathan about these meetings weighed on her conscience, but the sweet revenge of reliving those emotions was too addictive to resist. The anger she felt at betraying her husband's trust was overshadowed by the intensity of the romance that was resurging. It was during one of these conversations that Tyler revealed something that completely changed Claire's perspective on her marriage. They were organizing Aunt Margaret's belongings in the house's attic when he casually mentioned, "You know, it's funny how destiny works. Nathan always knew about us too." Claire stopped rummaging through the boxes and looked at him confused. "What do you mean?" Tyler sighed, as if he was revealing something he had kept for a long time. "In the last years of high school, Nathan was kind of obsessed with you. He always asked about our relationship, wanted to know if it was serious, if we had plans for the future." The revelation fell like a bomb. Claire had never noticed Nathan's interest in her at the time. He was just Tyler's quiet friend, always present but never in the foreground. "When you went to college and we broke up, Nathan was euphoric. He said he would finally have a chance." The emotional fraud being revealed was much bigger than Claire imagined. Destiny's revenge showed its claws. She had married a man who had desired her since adolescence while loving another. The romance of her life had been interrupted by someone who patiently waited for his opportunity. The discovery that Nathan had always known about her relationship with Tyler changed everything. Claire began to rethink every moment of their dating and marriage, looking for signs she had missed at the time. Nathan had really appeared in her life at a vulnerable time, right after the painful breakup with Tyler, when she was lost and needing direction. He had been patient, understanding, exactly what she needed at that moment. But now, with the perspective of years and Tyler's revelations, Claire was beginning to question whether everything had been calculated. The anger she felt grew with each new reflection. Had Nathan planned everything? Had he approached her knowing exactly who she was and what she represented? The betrayal she was beginning to feel was no longer just emotional, it was existential. Her entire life could have been built on an elaborate lie. The romance she lived with Nathan had always seemed safe, predictable, but never passionate. Now she understood why. He loved her, but she had never loved him the same way. The fraud was being committed on both sides, each pretending feelings that didn't completely exist. The conversations with Tyler became more intimate, more dangerous. They began to talk about what could have been, about the dreams they shared in youth, about what their lives would be like if they hadn't separated. "I always wondered if you thought about me," Tyler confessed one afternoon as they walked through the farm's fields. "Every day," Claire answered before she could control herself. The raw honesty of that confession left them in silence for long minutes. The tension between them had reached an almost unbearable point. They hadn't touched beyond casual greetings, but the attraction was palpable, electric, dangerous. Claire knew she was on the edge of an emotional precipice. The revenge that destiny plotted against her organized life was almost complete. The betrayal she committed against Nathan grew every day, every conversation, every moment she spent with Tyler. The romance that was resurging was more intense than in youth, seasoned by maturity and the awareness that time was precious. The anger she felt at being in that impossible situation was mixed with a happiness that scared her. The emotional fraud she committed against herself was coming to an end. She could no longer pretend that this was just nostalgia. The situation became even more complicated when Tyler made a revelation that shook the structures of Claire's reality. During a dinner at his house, a meeting she justified as business discussion, he told about a reunion he had with Nathan years ago. "It was about 5 years after you went to college. Nathan showed up here in Lexington, said he was passing through the region with the band. We talked all night, caught up on old times. Tyler paused, as if deciding whether he should continue. He mentioned he was dating a veterinarian in Nashville, a woman named Claire. I never imagined it was you. The revelation was like a punch to the stomach. Nathan knew exactly who Tyler was when he told about the relationship. He knew he was dating his former best friend's ex-girlfriend. The emotional fraud being revealed was systematic, calculated. The revenge Nathan had plotted against Tyler, if that's what it was, had worked perfectly. He had conquered the woman Tyler had never been able to forget. The anger Claire felt now was completely directed at her husband. The betrayal wasn't just in her feelings for Tyler, but in discovering that her entire life could have been a carefully orchestrated lie. The romance she had lived for 12 years with Nathan was beginning to seem like a carefully orchestrated farce. The last week in Kentucky was the most intense of all. Claire knew she needed to return to Nashville, that she couldn't postpone the return to reality any longer. But each day beside Tyler made her question all the choices she had made in life. They finally kissed on a rainy afternoon, a kiss loaded with 20 years of longing and regret. It was a moment of pure betrayal against Nathan, but also of liberation from an emotional prison Claire didn't even know existed. The fraud she had committed against herself over the years completely crumbled in that kiss. Destiny's revenge was almost complete. She had found her great love again, but was married to the man who had orchestrated their separation. The romance that was resurging was overwhelming, but also impossible. The anger she felt about the whole situation was mixed with a passion that consumed her. When they finally separated, both knew they had crossed a line from which there was no return. Claire's carefully constructed life was about to crumble, and she didn't know if she wanted to prevent or accelerate the process. The truth about Nathan and his motivations was about to come to light, and Claire sensed that the worst was yet to come. Claire's return to Nashville should have been a relief, a return to normalcy after weeks of emotional turbulence in Kentucky, but guilt consumed her from within. Every hug from the children, every welcome kiss from Nathan felt like a stab to her conscience. She had left Tyler with the promise that they would talk, that they would find a way to deal with the feelings that had resurfaced. The emotional fraud she committed against the family grew every hour, but she couldn't stop thinking about him, reliving every shared moment. Nathan seemed especially affectionate since her return, bringing flowers, planning romantic dinners, acting like the perfect husband he had always been. But now Claire saw everything with different eyes. Every gesture of his seemed calculated, every word carefully chosen. The anger she felt at having been possibly manipulated for years simmered under the surface of her apparent normalcy. The romance she lived with Nathan now seemed like an elaborate performance, and she wondered if it had ever been genuine. The revenge that destiny plotted against her organized life was just beginning to reveal itself in all its cruelty. The betrayal she committed emotionally against Nathan was nothing compared to what she suspected he had committed against her for years. It was on a Thursday night, 3 weeks after her return, that everything exploded. Claire was in the clinic office finishing the day's reports when Nathan appeared at the door with an expression she had never seen before. It wasn't anger, it wasn't sadness, it was something much more disturbing, a mixture of determination and coldness that made her blood freeze. "We need to talk," he said, closing the door behind him. "About Tyler Lewis." The name came out of his mouth like a bullet, direct and accurate. Claire felt the world collapse around her. How did he know? She had been so careful, hadn't told anyone about the reunion, about the feelings that had resurfaced. "I know you two met again in Kentucky," Nathan continued, his voice frighteningly calm. "I know you spent time together. I know the old feelings came back." The fraud she thought she was committing in secret had been discovered, but the way Nathan spoke suggested there was much more behind that conversation. The revenge in his eyes wasn't that of a betrayed husband, but of someone who had planned that moment for a long time. The anger Claire felt at being discovered was quickly replaced by a much worse sensation, that she had fallen into a carefully prepared trap. "How do you know?" Claire asked, her voice trembling. Nathan smiled, but it wasn't a smile of joy. It was cold, calculating, frightening. "Because I planned all of this, Claire, from day one." His words fell like bombs in the office silence. "Your Aunt Margaret didn't die of natural causes. She was sick, yes, but I accelerated the process." The confession was so absurd, so impossible, that Claire thought she had heard wrong. "You're crazy," she whispered, but Nathan shook his head calmly. "I'm perfectly sane, and I'm finally revealing the truth about our life together." He approached her desk, his eyes shining with an intensity she had never seen. "Do you think our meeting was casual? That I fell in love with you by chance?" "Everything was planned, Claire. Every moment, every gesture, every word." The betrayal being revealed was much bigger than any emotional infidelity. The fraud Nathan had committed for years was systematic, elaborate, psychopathic. The revenge he had plotted against Tyler and against her was finally coming coming to light. The romance she thought she had lived for 12 years was a complete lie, a cruel performance orchestrated by a man she had never really known. Tyler stole you from me when we were teenagers, Nathan continued, his voice gaining a tone of contained anger. I was in love with you from the first day of school, but you didn't even see me. It was always Tyler, Tyler, Tyler. He had everything, the charm, the confidence, your attention. I was just the invisible friend, the one who stood aside watching you two be happy. The revelation of the motivation behind years of manipulation was terrifying. Claire began to understand the magnitude of the revenge Nathan had orchestrated. When you two broke up and you went to college, I saw my opportunity. I spent years preparing, studying you, learning your tastes, your preferences, your fears. When we finally met in Nashville, I knew exactly how to win you over. The emotional fraud that had been committed against her for years was much worse than any physical betrayal. Nathan had stolen her life, her feelings, her ability to choose. The anger Claire felt now was mixed with terror. Who had she married? Who was the father of her children? The romance she thought she had lived was an illusion carefully constructed by a psychopath. The betrayal she had committed against him emotionally was nothing compared to what he had done to her entire life. And Tyler? Claire managed to ask, her voice almost inaudible. Nathan laughed, a cold sound that echoed through the empty office. Ah, Tyler. He never knew anything. Poor guy, he's still there in Kentucky, in love with the woman he never managed to forget. But he'll never have you, Claire, because you're mine. You've always been mine, from the moment I planned our life together. The possessiveness in his voice was terrifying. Claire realized she wasn't dealing with the man she thought she knew, but with someone much more dangerous. Did you kill my aunt to force me to go back to Kentucky? She asked, still trying to process the magnitude of the situation. I didn't kill her, Nathan answered casually. I just helped nature take its course. She was suffering anyway, I just accelerated the inevitable. And it worked perfectly. You went back, met Tyler again, fell in love again, exactly as I planned. The revenge he had orchestrated was much more elaborate than Claire imagined. The fraud he had committed against her life was total, complete, devastating. The anger she felt was mixed with fear. What else was Nathan capable of doing? The betrayal she was discovering now made her feelings for Tyler seem insignificant. The romance she thought she had lived was a lie, and she was married to a monster. Why? Claire asked, tears beginning to stream down her face. Why do this? Why destroy so many lives? Nathan leaned over the desk, his face inches from hers. Because I love you, Claire. More than Tyler ever loved. More than anyone could ever love. And because you belong to me. You always have. The declaration of love sounded like a threat, loaded with obsession and sick possessiveness. Tyler had his chance and wasted it. Now it's my turn forever. Claire realized she was trapped in a web much more complex than she imagined. Nathan wasn't just a jealous husband. He was an experienced manipulator who had orchestrated her entire life. The fraud he had committed against her for years was criminal, psychopathic. The revenge he had plotted against Tyler was cruel and elaborate. The anger Claire felt now was mixed with despair. How to get out of that situation, how to protect her children. The betrayal she had committed emotionally against Nathan now seemed justified, but also dangerous. The romance that had resurfaced with Tyler was about to become much more complicated. Nathan wasn't the type of man who would accept losing without a fight, and Claire sensed that the worst was yet to come. And now? Claire asked, trying to keep her voice steady despite the terror she felt. Nathan smiled again, that cold smile she would learn to fear. Now you're going to choose. You can continue our happy life here in Nashville, forget Tyler once more, and no one will ever know the truth. Or you can try to leave me, try to run to Kentucky and discover what happens when someone tries to take from me what's mine. The threat was clear, even without being explicit. Claire understood she wasn't dealing just with emotional blackmail, but with something much more dangerous. Nathan had planned her life for years, had manipulated situations, had possibly committed crimes. He wouldn't hesitate to do whatever was necessary to maintain control. The fraud she had discovered was just the tip of the iceberg. The revenge Nathan was capable of orchestrating against her and Tyler could be devastating. The anger she felt now was mixed with growing determination. She wouldn't be a puppet in his hands anymore. The betrayal she had committed against Nathan emotionally now seemed insignificant compared to what he had done to her life. The romance she felt for Tyler was about to become a matter of survival. Claire knew she needed to be very smart in the next moves, because she was dealing with a man who had proven capable of anything to get what he wanted. The days following Nathan's revelation were the most terrifying of Claire's life. She returned home that night, trying to process the magnitude of what she had discovered, but Nathan acted as if nothing had happened. He prepared dinner, helped the twins with homework, watched television with the family as he always did. The forced normalcy was more frightening than any explicit threat. Claire realized she was living with a stranger, a man who had orchestrated her entire life with the precision of a film director. The emotional fraud she had discovered was just the beginning. Nathan had documented everything, each step step of his manipulation carefully recorded as trophies of his revenge against Tyler. The anger she felt was mixed with pure terror, especially when she thought of the children sleeping upstairs, unaware they were living with a psychopath. The romance she felt for Tyler now seemed a dangerous luxury that could cost much more than she was willing to pay. The betrayal she had committed against Nathan emotionally was now seen in a completely different light. She had betrayed a monster who had kidnapped her life. Nathan knew exactly the effect his revelation had caused and seemed to delight in the power he exercised over her. It was the next day that Claire discovered the true extent of Nathan's manipulation. While he was at the studio rehearsing with the band, she decided to look for evidence of what he had confessed. What she found in his home office was much worse than she imagined. There were organized folders with photos of her since adolescence, newspaper clippings about her veterinary graduation, copies of personal documents she didn't even know he possessed. But most disturbing were the detailed diaries, years of notes about her habits, preferences, fears, dreams. Nathan had studied her like a scientist studies a specimen, cataloging every aspect of her personality to use in his manipulation. The fraud he had committed against her life was systematic, scientific, terrifying. There was also a folder about Tyler with recent photos, information about his life in Kentucky, even records of relationships he had tried to have over the years. Nathan's revenge wasn't limited to conquering Claire. He had actively sabotaged Tyler's love life, ensuring he remained single and available for when the right moment came. The anger Claire felt now was mixed with nausea. What kind of monster had she married? The betrayal she was discovering went far beyond lies about feelings. It was a complete violation of her autonomy as a human being. The most shocking discovery came when Claire found correspondence between Nathan and private investigators. He had hired professionals to monitor Tyler over the years, sabotaging his relationships whenever they seemed serious. There were detailed reports about the women Tyler had dated, strategies to drive them away, even evidence that Nathan had directly interfered in some situations. One of the letters revealed how he had convinced Tyler's ex-fiancée to cancel the wedding, using false information about infidelity. The revenge Nathan had orchestrated against his former friend was cruel and systematic, extending over decades. Claire realized that Tyler had lost not just her, but several opportunities for happiness because of Nathan's sick obsession. The fraud she was discovering now had multiple victims, and she was just the centerpiece of a much larger game. The anger she felt for Tyler having been manipulated and harmed for years was almost unbearable. The romance they had rediscovered in Kentucky now seemed even more precious, knowing how many obstacles Nathan had placed in his path. The betrayal Nathan had committed against their friendship was much deeper than any emotional infidelity she could have committed. But the discovery that really broke Claire was finding evidence that Nathan had manipulated even Aunt Margaret's death. There were emails exchanged with a caregiver who worked at the nursing home where the aunt was interned, suspicious payments, veiled references to accelerating the natural process. Aunt Margaret had been murdered, not directly, but through deliberate medical negligence orchestrated by Nathan. The revenge he had plotted included homicide, and Claire realized she was married to a criminal much more dangerous than she imagined. The fraud she had discovered now included murder, and she wondered how many other deaths Nathan might have caused over the years. The anger she felt was mixed with absolute terror. If he was capable of killing a defenseless elderly woman to execute his plan, what else would he be capable of doing? The romance she felt for Tyler now seemed like a death sentence for both of them. The betrayal Nathan had committed against basic humanity was unforgivable, but Claire knew she needed to be very careful about how to use this information. Nathan had proven to be a meticulous and relentless planner, and she couldn't underestimate his capacity for destruction. The situation became even more complicated when Claire discovered that Nathan had documented everything not out of nostalgia, but as insurance against possible future problems. He had created false evidence that she knew about his plans from the beginning, forged documents that would incriminate her as an accomplice to his manipulations. The fraud he had orchestrated included an emergency exit that would destroy her if she tried to expose him. There were fake emails in her name, fabricated conversations, even edited recordings that suggested her active participation in the schemes. Nathan had planned not just to conquer her, but to ensure she could never escape without destroying herself in the process. The revenge he had plotted was a perfect prison, built over years with the patience of an experienced predator. The anger Claire felt now was mixed with despair. How could she expose Nathan without incriminating herself? How could she protect Tyler without putting him in even greater danger? The betrayal she was discovering included her own programmed destruction, and she realized Nathan had thought of everything. The romance she felt for Tyler now seemed like a deadly trap, exactly as Nathan had planned from the beginning. It was then that Claire found the most disturbing evidence of all. Nathan had planned not just to reconquer her, but to completely destroy Tyler. There were documents detailing a plan to frame him for crimes he hadn't committed, planted evidence that would lead him to prison, even strategies to ruin his reputation reputation in the Kentucky community. Nathan's final revenge wasn't just to have Claire, but to ensure Tyler lost everything: freedom, dignity, future. The fraud she was discovering now included the systematic destruction of an innocent man, and Claire realized that every moment she spent with Tyler in Kentucky had been a trap being set. Nathan had allowed, even encouraged, their reunion because it was part of his bigger plan. The anger she felt now was absolute. Nathan wasn't just a manipulator, but a sadist who delighted in others' suffering. The romance she and Tyler had rediscovered was exactly what Nathan wanted to happen, so he could use it against both of them. The betrayal she was discovering was much bigger than anything she could have imagined. Claire realized she was at the center of a deadly game where Nathan controlled all the pieces, and that any false move could destroy not just her life, but Tyler's, and even her children's. The final revelation came when Claire discovered that Nathan had documented even his plans for the children. He had prepared strategies to use Jake and Emma as emotional weapons if she tried to leave him, including false evidence that she was an inadequate and dangerous mother. The fraud he had orchestrated included the possibility of taking her children from her, using maternal love itself as a chain to keep her trapped. Nathan had thought of everything, every possible reaction, every escape attempt, every form of resistance. The revenge he had plotted was a masterpiece of psychological manipulation, built over decades with the patience of a perfect predator. The anger Claire felt now was mixed with iron determination. She wouldn't allow Nathan to destroy more lives, wouldn't allow him to use her children as pawns in his sick game. The betrayal she was discovering included threats to the safety and well-being of her children, and that crossed a line she couldn't tolerate. The romance she felt for Tyler now seemed secondary compared to the urgent need to protect Jake and Emma. Claire knew she needed a plan, needed help, needed a way to turn the game against Nathan before it was too late. The war had begun, and she was determined to win, no matter the cost. 6 months after the devastating discovery about Nathan, Claire thought she had lost everything: her sanity, her faith in humanity, her ability to trust anyone again. She had spent weeks terrified, pretending normalcy at home while secretly copying all the evidence she had found, desperately trying to find a way to escape the trap Nathan had built around her life. The lawyer she consulted in secret was clear: the forged evidence Nathan had created was too convincing, and any attempt to expose him would result in her own legal destruction. The fraud he had orchestrated was perfect, every detail calculated to ensure his impunity. The anger she felt was mixed with despair. How to fight against someone who had planned every move decades in advance? The romance she felt for Tyler now seemed an impossible dream, especially knowing that any contact with him could result in the destruction of both. The betrayal Nathan had committed against her life seemed to have won, and Claire saw herself trapped forever in an existence she hadn't chosen. The revenge he had plotted against Tyler and against her seemed complete and irreversible, until a letter changed everything. The correspondence arrived on a Tuesday morning, delivered personally by a lawyer Claire had never seen before. The envelope bore the name Margaret Thompson, her aunt, and was sealed with red wax like in old movies. Inside, there was a handwritten letter in the aunt's trembling handwriting, dated just 1 week before her death. "My dear Claire," the letter began, "if you're reading this, it means Nathan has finally revealed his true nature, and you've discovered the extent of his manipulation." The first lines made Claire's heart stop. How did the aunt know? The letter continued. "I discovered his plans 5 years ago when he approached me pretending to be a researcher interested in family history, but I recognized the obsession in his eyes. It was the same I saw in my own husband before he tried to kill me." The revelation that Aunt Margaret had been a victim of domestic violence and had recognized the signs in Nathan was shocking. The fraud Nathan had tried to commit against the aunt had been discovered, but she had pretended to fall into the trap to protect Claire. The revenge the aunt had planned against Nathan was just beginning to be revealed. The anger Claire felt now was mixed with admiration for the courage of the woman she had underestimated. The betrayal Nathan had committed had been anticipated and prepared by someone much smarter than he imagined. The letter revealed that Aunt Margaret had spent the last 5 years of her life meticulously preparing Nathan's downfall. She had hired private investigators, the same ones Nathan used but without his knowledge, to document all his crimes. There was real evidence of murders, manipulations, financial fraud, all carefully collected and stored in safety deposit boxes that only Claire could access after the aunt's death. "Nathan thought he was killing me," the letter continued, "but I was already dying of cancer. I just allowed him to accelerate the process so you would discover the truth at the right moment." The revenge the aunt had orchestrated was much more elaborate than anything Nathan had planned. She had used her own death as a weapon, transforming what Nathan thought was his final victory into his complete destruction. The fraud he had committed against the aunt had been turned against him with superior intelligence. The anger Claire felt for Nathan now was mixed with deep gratitude for the aunt who had sacrificed the last years of her life to protect her. The betrayal Nathan had committed against the Thompson family had been anticipated and punished by someone he had completely underestimated. The romance Claire felt for Tyler now had a real chance to exist, thanks to the sacrifice of an extraordinary woman. But the biggest surprise came when Claire discovered that Aunt Margaret had been secretly helping Tyler during all these years. The letter revealed that she had identified Nathan's manipulations against Tyler and had begun to interfere, silently undoing the damage Nathan caused. When Nathan sabotaged one of Tyler's relationships, the aunt arranged a way to reveal the truth to the harmed woman. When Nathan planted false evidence against Tyler, the aunt ensured that honest investigators discovered the fraud. Tyler never knew he had a guardian angel, the aunt wrote, but I couldn't allow Nathan to destroy an innocent man's life. The revenge the aunt had plotted included protecting Tyler from all of Nathan's manipulations, ensuring he remained whole and available for when Claire discovered the truth. The fraud Nathan had tried to commit against Tyler had been systematically undone by someone much smarter. The anger Claire felt for all the lost years was mixed with relief. Tyler had been protected, even without knowing it. The betrayal Nathan had committed against their friendship had been neutralized by a woman who understood the value of true love. The romance she and Tyler had rediscovered in Kentucky wasn't just nostalgia. It was a love that had been preserved and protected through the years by someone who believed in it. The letter also revealed that the aunt had prepared sufficient evidence to ensure Claire could not only get rid of Nathan, but also obtain full custody of the children. There were secret recordings of Nathan confessing his crimes, documents proving the manipulations, even evidence that he had planned to use the children as emotional weapons. Nathan is a dangerous psychopath, the aunt wrote, but he made the mistake of underestimating an old woman who had faced men like him before. The revenge the aunt had orchestrated included complete protection for Claire and the children, ensuring Nathan would lose everything he had gained through manipulation. The fraud he had committed for years was about to be exposed with irrefutable evidence. The anger Claire felt now was directed not just against Nathan, but against herself for not having noticed the signs earlier. The betrayal Nathan had committed against her family was about to be punished with the full force of the law. The romance she felt for Tyler now had not just a chance to exist, but the support and blessing of someone who had fought to preserve it. Aunt Margaret had transformed her own death into a weapon of justice, and Nathan was about to discover he had messed with the wrong family. Aunt Margaret's plan even included Tyler's financial rehabilitation, who had lost several business opportunities due to Nathan's interference. She had secretly invested in his ranch, guaranteed loans when he needed them, even directed clients to his horse training services. Tyler is a good man who deserves happiness, the aunt wrote, and you also deserve to be loved for who you really are, not for who someone wants you to be. The letter ended with detailed instructions on how to access all the evidence, how to contact the lawyers she had hired, and how to ensure Nathan faced the consequences of his crimes without Claire or the children being harmed. The revenge the aunt had prepared was complete, comprehensive, and absolutely devastating for Nathan. The fraud he had committed for decades was about to be publicly exposed, destroying not just his freedom, but his reputation and future. The anger Claire felt now was mixed with iron determination to honor the aunt's sacrifice and ensure justice was done. The betrayal Nathan had committed against so many people was about to be punished with interest. The romance she and Tyler could have now had not just a chance, but a solid foundation built on truth and justice. 2 years later, Claire was on the Kentucky farm's porch, watching Tyler teach the twins to ride horses. Nathan was serving a 20-year sentence for murder, fraud, and an impressive list of other crimes that Aunt Margaret's investigations had revealed. The sanctuary for rescued horses that she and Tyler had created together was thriving, funded by the inheritance the aunt had left and the assets Nathan had been forced to surrender as reparation. Jake and Emma had adapted well to the new life, and Tyler had become not just a loving stepfather, but a true father to them. The fraud Nathan had committed against their lives had been completely undone, replaced by a reality built on honesty and genuine love. The revenge Aunt Margaret had orchestrated had resulted not in destruction, but in healing and renewal. The anger Claire had felt for years had been replaced by deep gratitude and inner peace. The betrayal she had discovered had transformed into the liberation she didn't even know she needed. The romance she and Tyler lived now was real, mature, and built on truth. Exactly as Aunt Margaret had planned, Claire smiled, touching the letter she still carried in her pocket, whispering a thank you to the extraordinary woman who had sacrificed everything to ensure that true love won in the end. Claire's story teaches us that coincidences aren't always the work of chance. Sometimes they're the result of manipulations carefully orchestrated by people who confuse obsession with love. Nathan spent decades building a life based on lies, believing he could force someone to love him through control and emotional fraud. But truth has its own power, and no matter how elaborate a lie may be, it always finds a way to surface. The revenge he plotted against Tyler and Claire ended up turning against him, proving that those who sow betrayal reap destruction. Aunt Margaret shows us that true love sometimes manifests in unexpected ways, through silent sacrifice, discreet protection, relentless fight for justice. She transformed her final years into a mission to protect Claire and Tyler, proving that the wisdom of experience can be a powerful weapon against evil. Her revenge wasn't driven by anger, but by genuine love and desire for justice. She understood that sometimes we need to fight not just for our own happiness, but for the happiness of those we love. Claire and Tyler discovered that true love can survive decades of separation, manipulation, and sabotage. They learned it's never too late to start over, to build a life based on honesty and mutual respect. The romance they live now is more mature, more conscious, more precious because it was conquered through overcoming immense obstacles. They prove that fraud can deceive for a while, but cannot destroy genuine feelings forever. The anger they felt from betrayal transformed into gratitude for the second chance they received. This story shows that truth always wins, even when it seems like lies have all the power. If you know someone living in a situation of emotional manipulation, or if this story made you reflect on relationships based on control instead of love, share this video. Sometimes the right message arrives at the exact moment to save a life. If you enjoyed this story of overcoming injustice, leave your like and subscribe to the channel for more content that will make you question, feel emotions, and believe in the transformative power of truth. Your interaction helps us reach more people who need to hear these stories of hope and renewal.